Hi everyone, it's Brittany from Green Bee Flowers here in Strathroy, Ontario. We are farming cut flowers in Canadian Zone 6A. We are going to do something a little bit different, so I'm actually going to take you along for a design session in the studio. I have an order that's headed out today in a beautiful large antique mason jar, and I thought it would be fun to kind of take you guys through that process, so we're going to do that together. Later this week, hopefully by the weekend, I will have a farm update video done for you. I'm also hoping to do some information on how we propagate our dahlias. We are due to get the snowstorm now that was out west earlier. So we're still a little behind in shipping because I want to make sure that the dahlia tubers are safe getting to where they need to go. I hope everybody had a happy Easter because it is April here, and enjoy the video. Thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to take you along today to show you how I do one of our larger mason jar arrangements. Now, I've been procrastinating doing this because we don't have our farm flowers really ready to go yet, because we operate our flower farm and floral studio in kind of a combination business model. So in our off season I do bring in floral that I wholesale from a local wholesaler. I do try and bring in as much Ontario and Canadian grown floral as possible, but it is important to remember that we do have to fill some gaps, especially with greenery, with some things that are brought in from some other countries, normally the US, so this boxwood is from the US, but we do have things like waxflower and ruscus, which are coming in from South America. I am going to kind of break down the arrangement here, the large size that we do, kind of what I put in it. It's not really a stem count thing so much as it is monetary count, and so when I'm arranging, I know personally how much every stem is costing me. So for instance, Cloni Ranunculus, which are these beautiful ranunculus, very nice thick stems. These are coming in from, I think it's Virgil Greenhouses or Waymar, that are in Niagara, which are local, so they're local flowers, but the cost on these to me personally is anywhere between, you know, $3.50 to $5 a stem. For those of you who grow ranunculus and you know what the Cloni corms cost, you understand kind of why the price point is that high. But it also means that when I am doing my markup, depending on what your markup is, floral markups are typically anywhere between, you know, 2.5 times to 4 times, depending on your business model and where you live. This ranunculus stem is going to cost your customers anywhere between, you know, $11 potentially all the way up to the $15 mark. So something to bear in mind is your cost when you are putting together your arrangement. So now the vessel that I'm using today is an old vintage mason jar. These mason jars are called crown mason jars. They were made in Canada. Normally these were made anywhere between like 1910 all the way up to just about the 1950s is kind of when they stopped making these. So these are vintage. I love scouring for these at my secondhand stores. I love using these for unique arrangements. Well, this is what we're going to be filling today. Some of the foliage and flowers that we're going to be using, and it is foliage. So we have this, which is called Italian Ruscus. I love Italian Ruscus. It's got so much movement to it. You can use this to really make an arrangement feel very spacious, very large, whimsical, to take up a lot of space. We are also going to be using this beautiful variegated boxwood, which I love this. This is such a gorgeous foliage to use, especially in the spring. Normally around this time I also like to bring in pennycress, but there was a shortage of that after Easter, so I don't have that in the studio. For filler, we are using this beautiful lime scented wax flower. I prefer using wax flower to baby's breath. I actually don't keep baby's breath stocked in the studio at all, but I love this. I think this is such a beautiful, beautiful flower. Oh, it's such a pretty flower. For filler, we're also using local hellebore. So these are also known as Lenten rose. So local hellebore. These are coming on strong right now. They are in season for maybe 2 more weeks before the weather's too warm for them. So we're using these as much as we possibly can in everything. For filler, we are also using just white flat mums. Lovely little bit of a green center to kind of bring that lime green in as well. For one of our smaller focals, we're using this gorgeous Canadian grown lisianthus. I love it because it's got just kind of these really beautiful little fluffles, that's not a word, fluffles on the end. We also are going to be utilizing some local tulips. We are a little bit off yet from having tulips come off on the farm, probably about another week. But these are the perfect color to go with the arrangement that I'm making. For height, we are using this gorgeous, which I haven't processed properly yet, this is purple veronica, which again, coming out of the local farms. Lovely florets on them, so beautiful. We're also going to be using white snapdragon. Only one because I know exactly where this is going in the arrangement already. Beautiful. And then of course our focal flowers are going to be these stunningly beautiful ranunculus. Big Cloni Ranunculus. You can always tell the Clonis, they have absolutely massive stems and their bloom sizes are usually, you know, 2 inch to 3 inches across. And then when they bloom, they get really big. So I always start my arrangement with foliage. I never start by putting the flowers in. I always start using the Ruscus or some other very whimsical looking foliage. Now with Ruscus, it's important to make sure you're checking the back of the leaves because every once in a while they'll be kind of dirty and you want to make sure that you're like not sending the dirt out to the customers. Ruscus I like as well because you can use it in multiple intervals. So if you cut it partially down the stem, you know, you've got one piece that you can use here and then this piece you can still kind of use on that side. Always take your stems off so that you're not having any foliage in the vase. And then you can just kind of set that in there and manipulate it into the spot that you want. With mason jar arrangements like this, I don't typically use any like flower egg or anything on top of this. I don't think it's necessary because as you start to build up your arrangement, make those crisscross stems inside, you're not going to have any issues with things not staying where you want them to be. And Ruscus is a fun one too. You can cut them to all sorts of different heights, right? To kind of create movement in the arrangement, and typically you can trim off leaves that don't look great without too much trouble. Now I'm going to turn this around because I'm trying to make this the arrangement facing you. I gotta be able to see what I'm doing. Now with my stems placed in, you can see I've kind of created, you know, a base for my arrangement. I know you know where the peaks are going to be, and I know where it's going to feel really nice and elongated there. Next thing I'll typically do is add in my more structured, so this is structured foliage, so this is the boxwood. And I'll just find kind of like a natural point to cut it down. Again, remember, we are removing all of those bottom leaves. And in it goes. I don't typically worry too much about having the stems go all the way right to the bottom of the vase. Customers usually know to keep an eye on the water level. Things need to be filled up. We've added a bit of structure to that, so you can see it is already really starting to look like it's coming together. Now, most people will typically add their focal flower next. I personally like to add my spike, at least my one spike, because that's going to kind of dictate as well, like the orientation of where my focal is going to go. So I'm probably going to stick my spike either on this side here, you know, to kind of frame off some of that ruscus that's there, so I can stick it there. Or if I want to really bring the eye over, I might put it on this side of my arrangement to kind of balance. There's no right or wrong way to do this. So I kind of like it on this side. You can see it a little better, and I like that it is acting as a balancing point to my boxwood stem here. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to add in one of my focal ranuncula. So we're going to bring this one in here. Easiest way to do this is that when you are doing a mason jar arrangement, kind of like look to see where the top of your vase is, measure accordingly, right? You're going to be putting your stems in on a bit of an angle. So I will typically measure up against my jar. You can always cut it too long the first time and shorten it after, but you want to be really careful not to make it too short at first, because then it might not sit where you want it to sit. So I will typically start by cutting it, you know, right around here, so that when I put it into my jar on an angle, it's gonna sit just off centered. I never have my focal perfectly centered. I might have it just off a little bit. And there's a reason for that. The reason I do that is because then when I bring in something like my hellebore, which is going to act, you know, as that filler to kind of go into the arrangement, I can use those stems of hellebore around my focal to bring a little bit more depth to it. Because the hellebore has some of those, sorry about the fridge, because the hellebore has some of those really gorgeous colors in it too, when I stick it and kind of use it to frame, it's really going to make that ranunculus pop. And now I want to make sure I'm balancing it out, so I'm going to definitely put some hellebore back here as well. And hellebore is one where I will stick that straight into the vase as opposed to on an angle, because it's already got a lot of movement to it as a flower. So I don't have to worry too much about what that's going to look like. You can definitely see that, like, on the back side, it's really creating, you know, that very, very beautiful movement that I want with the arrangements. The other thing to note when you're doing mason jar arrangements is if you're trying to get a stem in and it just won't go, just lift the arrangement up slightly, kind of like you would a bouquet, and then angle that stem sort of in where you want it. So now with my next focal, this one I believe that I want, you know, to kind of stick up a little bit. So I'm going to cut it a little taller so that it will automatically have a little bit of whimsy to it. Again, always make sure you're trimming your stems on your angle. You know, and by adding that in kind of there, it's going to draw your eye and kind of keep those color blocking going in the same area. Next thing I'm going to do is bring in some of my lisianthus, which again you can see specifically chosen because it fits with the color scheme that we have going on here. Now lizzies I love because they always come with like multiple stems on a single stem. So you can actually cut that stem down and get lots more out of it. And because they're multiple stems, you can typically manipulate them the way you want to. So for instance, this one here, I actually split that stem up and used it kind of to frame the boxwood. Whereas this one here, I'm going to cut the stem a bit shorter and use it on the other side and sit it in the arrangement a little deeper. So that was only one stem of lisianthus. So now I'm going to use my second stem. And these ones I'm going to bring kind of around the back side of the arrangement here. Provide some of that color that you want so that it looks full all over. Alright, now to balance out that snapdragon, I'm going to use some of my flat mums. Now with flat mums, I almost never cut it so that I'm bunching those top mums together in an arrangement, so I will almost never leave them like this. I will typically, you know, deconstruct that stem down even further so that I might have two together still. And then I'll take those two and I'll kind of set them in straight into the arrangement. So they might sit a little higher like that. And then I can use one of the other ones that I cut off to kind of go a little deeper into the arrangement to kind of bring your eye focused to where you want it to go. Now I also have these really lovely dark purple veronica. These I'm going to use to kind of offset that snapdragon a little, create a bit more movement. So we have three of these. I like to stick in with, you know, threes. That's how the eyes like to move. The reason I was able to not use 3 ranunculus is because that lisianthus is in the same color scheme, so I was kind of able to like fudge the eye a little bit. So stick one kind of in there. Stick one kind of in the center. And then because we're working in groups of 3, stick one off to the other side. So you can see that feels very whimsical already. Next I have my tulips. So the important thing to remember about tulips is that, you know, sometimes when they've been in their vases in the cooler for a bit, they droop and kind of develop their own life. It's because tulips keep growing. So when you're putting them in your arrangement, you really want to make sure that you're being very conscientious of that, because once they go in and once you cut them, tulips will keep growing towards the light. So it doesn't actually matter too much how you put them in the first time. I will typically put tulips around the edges. The reason I do that is because it gives them the opportunity and lots of space to keep growing, and oftentimes when they do their droopy thing, it allows them to kind of, you know, create that extra little bit of whimsy there off the side. And then, you know, too, they'll open for the customer, which is one of my, that's how I love to send out flowers. I don't care if they're open for me. Bouquets last the longest when they stay open for the customer. And I think as farmer florists, that's sometimes something we struggle with, because it's a delicate balance to kind of know, you know, when the flower's blooming versus when it's kind of best to go and be enjoyed by the people that are purchasing your flowers, because you want to be able to see them too. So like with a ranunculus, you're not going to harvest them when they're fully open, because that's actually going to like shorten the life on the flower for your customers. Snapdragons, you need to make sure, you know, the bottom third of the snapdragon is open for the longest life for the customer, and for the lisianthus too, you want to have it so that those bottom blooms are fully open, but these top ones will continue to bloom for the customer themselves. That's really important, and as you work on it and as you learn, you'll get better at that. Tulips, it's always important to take off the droopy leaves, so we do that. You know, give them a nice clean cut. And then I'm kind of using the same grid that I put the veronica in for the tulips. All right, and lastly, I'm gonna add in some of this really beautiful wax flower just to fill in those extra spaces. Give it a little bit more, you know, white in there to kind of offset some of those dark colors. So this is something that I'll stick kind of on the back here to fill that space in. Stick it on the side where it's just a little bit heavy on the greenery to break that up a bit. That didn't go in the vase. So like I stuck one kind of there, and then I'll probably add my next one kind of here. So there we have it. This is one of our larger sized mason jars. And I use the same style of mason jar arrangements when we do our summer mason jars as well. So you can see here. So with this one, this is one that we did actually yesterday. We had a busy Easter weekend in the studio, but you can see we've kind of used the same style of arranging for our small mason jars, you know, and our large mason jars. Keeps it very whimsical, keeps it very on brand, using as much as we can from local flowers, and our customers love it. So much for joining us today. It's been a while since I've done a design with me video. I hope this was useful to you. I hope this was beneficial. And you know, when you're working in your own farm as well, like I said, we have access to our wholesalers. So for some of you who are doing arrangements like this in the summer, you know, you might have access to things like raspberry greens or Ninebark or hydrangea foliage, or honeysuckle is one of my favorite very whimsical foliages to use in the summertime. Figure out what works for you, throw stuff in a vase overnight, see what droops, see what doesn't. Make sure you're not using invasives, but there's lots of different types of, you know, greenery that can be used for arrangements like this. This is just what I have in the studio because we have this order is actually headed out to a customer today. So if you have any questions, by all means, drop them down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. If you'd like to follow along to our channel, please subscribe. We really appreciate you guys all being here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a good day. Bye.